It's time for this week's First Utah Business Spotlight.
So for this business spotlight, we've got John Briggs with Incite Tax and Accounting. They're located here in Sandy, not far from my office, actually. And we're just going to talk to John about some of the things that his firm does and maybe some just sort of general tax stuff as well. So first, tell us a little bit about your business and what you do for your customers.
Well, Incite Tax and Accounting is a tax and accounting firm. We like to take a proactive approach to the tax strategy and accounting so that our clients can keep and grow their wealth. We focus primarily on small business owners. And small business is so defined so differently across the board.
Sure, the SBA says it's anyone under 500, but most of us don't consider a company with 500 employees to really be small.
Right. Yeah. We'll do business with people who are independent contractors who make $20,000. We have other clients who have 50 to 80 employees and they do over $10 million a year. But at the end of the day, it's the small business owner that we're focusing on.
So do you frequently handle the returns for the entity and the business owner kind of all together so you can maximize the taxes for that individual?
Yeah, I think of it kind of like juggling. If someone has one ball, they look a little retarded juggling. And so with a couple balls in the air, you have a little bit more flexibility with some of the tax code.
So what would you say separates you from your competitors? Because there's lots of CPAs.
There are a ton of CPAs. In fact, within a 5-mile radius, there's like 28 accounting firms.
Everybody has to file taxes, so that's why.
Everyone has to file taxes, and there's actually no barrier to entry in our industry. People don't realize that. You go to H&R Block, those guys potentially don't have very much training at all.
Well, if I understand correctly, to be a tax preparer, you don't even have to have a college degree, right?
You don't. You have to fill out a form, get your fingerprints tested or taken, and then send them off to the IRS, and they issue you it's called a P10. And as long as you have that, you pay them some money, basically, and they allow you to prepare tax returns.
Right. It's not exactly the same as a CPA.
Not the same as a CPA. And all CPAs are different as well. I mean, just because someone's a CPA doesn't mean they focus on tax.
Right.
The CPA, the tax code itself, the tax part of the CPA, probably maybe a fifth of the exam. To say, as far as what separates us, because everyone has to file taxes, the tax code itself, tax law, does dictate some similarities between us and our competitors. And so in that regard, you would see the same thing. And in fact, if you asked an accounting firm, we are all probably going to say we're proactive.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, just because we say it doesn't mean it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And so we try to actually be proactive. We want to have a relationship with our clients. We want to talk to them. Because we understand that by having that conversation with them, and knowing what's going on in their lives, we can apply the tax code because we live the tax code every day. They don't.
Sure, and they may not even realize of some aspects of the tax code that are out there that could benefit them or hurt them.
Exactly.
If you don't know what's going on in their business and in their life. And I find a lot of times that the CPA is sort of the first or second phone call somebody makes when something's going on, whatever it is, whether it's with employees, with buying property, sending their kids to school, whatever it is, that's the first or second call.
We do get some interesting questions sometimes that don't apply to what we do.
that aren't really say, hey, this isn't my job. So being a small business owner in Utah, what do you like about it? What are the challenges? What do you think?
The challenges that we see primarily are 1099 versus W-2 employees is always a question that comes up with small business employers.
Right, and I always just like to clarify, there's no such thing as a 1099 employee. It's an oxymoron.
Exactly.
Yeah, so if you're paying them on a 1099, they're not an employee, so you need to decide.
Yep.
What are they?
And employees get W-2s at the end of the year, not W-4s.
Right.
An independent contractor versus an employee, when you're looking at that, you really need to look at the relationship you have and how you're paying them, the type of constraints that you're wanting to put, and how much control you want to have over them.
And I think that's the key. A lot of businesses think it's just an arbitrary decision that they get to make. And there's the IRS Factor 20 test, there's the DOL Economic Reality test, and in both cases, who are they looking out for? It's not the business owner.
Exactly. I can tell you the government would love to have you pay everyone as W-2. And when they come in and do that type of contractor versus employee audit, that's what they're going to look for. They want to figure out how can they justify this person being an employee?
Right.
But that being said, there are lots of ways an employer or the business, an entity can structure the relationship to make the person an independent contractor. There is some pros and cons though, and they have to weigh that in their lives. But most of the time, they don't think about that.
Well, the key is they have to be independent. I think that's the term. The important part of the term. There has to be real independence for that to work. And sometimes maybe it started out that way, but over time things changed.
Yeah, they got to have their own autonomy. And sometimes the business owner wants to kind of dictate exactly how they do that in those scenarios. You got to be really careful because those can cost a lot. I mean, IRS comes in, or the Department of Workforce Service, who generally does that audit in Utah, will come in, and they can go back a couple years.
Sure, I've seen them go back 3 years. Yeah. And of course, just tell us what happens when that sort of, what's the consequence to the employer when that happens?
The consequence is they basically need to pay the payroll tax on those wages paid for the entire period that's getting assessed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
could be a lot.
15.3%.
Yeah, could be a lot. And one thing I've seen is that sometimes the reason those audits happen in the first place is somebody didn't pay their personal taxes. And that's what got the IRS or Department of Workforce Services or whatever looking at
that or
it.
a bad apple. You can have an employee report you effectively when they try to apply for unemployment,
mm-hmm.
and they find out they were paid as a contractor. Then they try to fight it, saying, no, I was definitely an employee.
Sure. And of course, their explanation of the relationship now is going to be
totally different.
Right. Well, that's, I think, a really important thing for businesses to keep in mind is the 1099 versus employee, because they can't be the same, and it's definitely a major pitfall. Well, thanks so much for being on our show.
Thanks.